But it's really cool to see how this show doesn't fall into stereotypes, because there are a lot of stereotypes that have, you know, a very long, annoying history in Hollywood, and they don't do any of them here. So I wrote down some examples. There are many, many more. So there's the stereotype of the sort of masculinized, independent Black woman. They do have that kind of the mom. Mel's mom kind of fits that stereotype. But then you also have Mel, who very much is the opposite of the stereotypical Black female character. She is very feminine. And she even uses her femininity at one point, which starts to be a little bit of a different cliche of like using her attractiveness to solve problems. You know, like that's kind of like sometimes a sexist cliche, but she does that sometimes. But then she also uses her wit and diplomacy and intelligence, and so it's like there's that, but there's also this, and so now it's not a stereotype.
I actually think she's more compelling when she does use sexuality, because that wasn't her focus. So she's she's an attractive woman as animated, and she's introduced as a very cunning, very what's the word, strategic, like she knows how to play this game.
That way, yeah.
Yes, and then when she does use sexuality, it's actually augmented, because you're like, oh man, how serious is she? Is she?
You don't expect her to do that, yeah.
Yeah, well, and the fact that she is doing it, you're like, is she serious? Does she like this guy, or is she playing this guy? So it actually makes her more dangerous or less predictable. And while she's doing it, you're on edge. So I thought that, even though and I always try not to worry about stereotypes while also trying not to repeat them.
Yeah, I think you shouldn't overthink it, but I think it's like important to at least do a pass of it, like, because sometimes we repeat stereotypes without meaning to. So I think it's worth thinking about them. But
absolutely,
like, you don't want to overthink it, because if you overthink it, you start.
I think the key is that
you can't write anything.
Multidimensional. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Multidimensional. So when she uses sexuality, that's not like, when I think of Mel, I don't think of a woman constantly using sexuality. I think of a diplomatic, cunning, and she's very still. You know, when she's in her scene, she like, you know, I read this thing about lions and how lions don't move a lot, except, you know, when they do move, it's like to strike. So whenever I see a character, especially a power character who moves very little, I always think that they have the real power mentality secretly embedded in them. And she has that. She barely moves, and she's a painter. There's this great animation with her painting this picture. And I'm like, how does the animator like getting all of that in there? It's just perfect.
Yes.
So anyway, she's multidimensional. So when she does something that brushes against a stereotype, it's immediately forgiven, totally, because she's not one-dimensional on it.
Right, which is, you know, there's nothing wrong with stereotypes in of themselves, except their problem is when that character is only that, or if the only example of a character of that trait in your story is that. So example, if like the only Black woman at all was Mel's mom, I forget her name, that would kind of be uncomfortable, be like, but she's there, but then there's also Mel, and so now it's canceled out, because now you have you know, more than one Black character, and they're not.
Well, but again, even Mel's mom, who, like, I think you're right, she is masculinized in a way. You know, she's very she objectifies that little guy. She's like, yeah, I'm gonna sample the cuisine. You know,
did you see her like sitting with like her legs open and stuff like that?
Totally, but that's a power move.
Right.
I've actually read about like Lyndon Johnson, the president, would be in a pool, and when people would come over to talk, he'd get out of the pool naked. And like, what do you have for me? And people are like, it's a power move. So
well, she did that. She did that in this.
Right. So when I see it, but even the legs spread, like in the tub and everything, all of that came across to me as power moves.
Oh yeah.
And she acts like a power move type person. And then when she's giving advice, it's power moves. So everything about her speaks on power moves.
My point is just that it's more of a cliche to do that specifically with Black women than it is with other races. For some reason, like you have more of those. Yeah. So that's something that you'll hear people critique.
No, you're right. You don't see like a woman from India in these like massive. Well, I guess this show has some, but you're right. In general.
It's less common. You'll hear a lot of Black women will complain. They'll be like, I want more examples of Black women that are just like able to be feminine and pretty. Like, why is it less common for us to? It's a weird thing. And so because we have Mel as a character, that makes that like it's not a stereotype. It works out. You have both.
Well, and then again, when you introduce both of these characters and put them together, none of that's at the. You're not even thinking about that.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I'm saying? The relationship is so strained, and the mother is so dominant, and the daughter is so capable that you're like, who's winning? Who's losing? I don't know. I can't tell. You know, and it makes for great viewing.
Yes. I have a few more. So
Sable,
sorry. If someone
Sable does say all the characters as they're introduced in the first 3 episodes seem to fit a particular stereotype. But by the time they're reintroduced in episode 4, they immediately begin to undermine and subverting their own stereotypes.
Beautiful.
It's a genius storytelling technique to make the audience feel comfortable at first and then set them up for the whiplash later so they feel like they can't anticipate where you'll go next.
I love it.
Silco's a great example of that. Like when you first meet him, he's just like, oh, it's just yet another slimy, villain type that just uses violence to get what he wants. But no, he's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, and she meaning the mother, the only character in the show that speaks the truth, who only speaks the truth, James says. But her personality is so grating, we don't want to trust her as the audience. Yeah, and weapons cannot be unmade. I was thinking about that line earlier, and they're always used.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the mom kind of shows up in the late hour of this season. Is like, hey, got any hex tech?
Hey, daughter, I haven't spoken to you in a long time. Well, I'm definitely here for no ulterior motive. I want your weapon.
Totally. And she basically says, look, yeah, that's why I'm here. What, should I apologize? Is it weird that I want this? And suddenly you're like, oh, she's defending this like completely shallow reason for being here. And then you realize, well, maybe it's not so shallow. She wants hex tech. Of course, it gets to the point where you see through all that and you're like, of course she wants hex tech. And of course she would ask her daughter's sitting on this gold mine. And then the daughter, it's like, well, are you going to say no? So suddenly this real simplistic plot line, as the characters assert themselves, you're like, it's not so simple. This is actually, it makes perfect sense. And the characters now have to deal with this emerging demand, being placed on them.
Some more examples.
Okay, go for it.
So you have a pretty, somewhat objectified sex worker, a man. You usually expect that kind of an archetype to be.
Oh yeah.
Character. The person who wants to solve all problems with primal aggression, a woman. Where I'm talking about why, of course. That usually that archetype you would see as a male character. The other thing, sometimes it's a very annoying thing. Like if you ever see any sort of a female character who can fight at all, even a little bit, and then people always look at her and they're like, wow. And she goes, I grew up with older brothers.
I read that. Yeah.
They subverted that one. In this case, it's Vi who plays the role of the older brother to Echo. He's the one saying, oh, Vi, show me some moves or whatever. She's the one that's teaching these younger kids. There's a pretty girl in a shower scene with Caitlin, except it's not sexualized at all, and it's very empathetic with her. Like it's not used in a way to objectify her, but it's to show her being vulnerable. She's in a vulnerable moment. This is right before she gets kidnapped, right? And she's also like thinking back to Vi. It's a very, very good scene. But that could have been a certain kind of a sexist stereotype, but it wasn't. I think I mentioned this one already. The manic pixie dream girl with blue hair. That's a very specific cliche that is completely subverted, right? She's not a dream girl. Jinx is genuinely unwell. And so they went out of their way with not only like the physical design like we talked about, but also just how her whole character is created to make you not want to desire her, like you're moved to want to help her. So that was cool.
I'm having to look that one up. I don't know about that. I just
the manic pixie dream girl.
Manic pixie dream girl with blue hair.
They don't always have blue hair, but they usually have
pink
some
or blue. Yeah.
Yeah, pink's another common one for the manic pixie dream girl. You should watch some YouTube videos on it. It's a pretty funny. It's happened enough times that it's now a cliche, and people will instantly cringe when that comes up. They don't always have colored hair, but the manic pixie dream girl is definitely
I think even the video you're referring to talks about the pigtails, about how and when girls will wear them in like.
I don't think there's a specific video. I'm just saying in general.
Anyway, they were talking about pigtails and how Jinx even wears pigtails, but it's not sexualized or cute or anything like that. It's like it has nothing to do with that, and Jinx kind of takes the center stage on that. So you're right. A lot of these tropes are subverted completely, like regularly.
Yes.
The manic pixie dream girl exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures?
That sounds about right.
Okay.
There's like look it up. They'll find there's several movies that fit this exact trope, and they have like very similar types of protagonists. Anyway, it's just happened enough times that it's become a cliche. And then I wrote one other one down. I said, you have, so often with women fighting, another trope besides the I have older brothers trope is they're often, distant shooters, right? So it's like clothes or whatever. And they're kind of sexualized and they're made to look pretty. They don't really get hurt. Not here, not here at all. We already talked about this, but there's a brawl between two seasoned fist fighters. It was Vi and Savika, and then Vi and Savika again. There are some of the kind of pretty distant shooter types. Like I feel like Caitlyn and Jinx both kind of fit into that. But in all cases,
is shown with a musket or a rifle.
And she uses both. But in all cases, it's because these weapons make sense for each of their specific characters. There's like a wide range of things going on. So like overall, of all these different trope subversions that I'm mentioning, it's like the underlying principle is that each character is a person. And what determines their individual traits and behavior, it's not their gender, it's not their sexuality or their race. It's just like the actual histories and personalities they have as individuals. And that is how you do diversity.
Yay. I totally agree. I agree with everything you said. And I think Arcane serves as a model, and I hope I get more movies like Arcane.